How's it going, and welcome to my guide series on Curse of Strahd, a 5th edition module. In this series, we will be going over all of the story beats, all of the locations, and just diving into how to make this adventure really shine and make it pop for your players. But before I go into anything major, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. So players that actually plan on playing on this module and don't want things ruined for them, I would suggest that you kindly go away. But for DMs that want a more hands-on approach and want just a hands-on guide for this module, then you can go ahead and stick around because we have a lot to go over. Alright, now that the player's gone, let's go ahead and get started. Curse of Strahd is a doozy to go through. There is 15 chapters, and over the course of those 15 chapters, we get a lot of information on different locations. But unfortunately, we don't get too many story beats to work off of. This is not a linear adventure. It is a sandbox. Your players could show up anywhere at any time. That being said, though, if you run it as intended, then your players are on sort of a track moving all throughout the lands of Barovia. But once they reach a certain destination, specifically Vallaki, they will be able to go around the world more and explore and get a whole bunch more quests and do a whole bunch of crazy things. So because of the erratic nature of this module, I'm not going to be covering it chapter by chapter as I do with all my other modules. I'll be going at it how you would more than likely approach it, which if you crack open the book and you'll see, the chapters here are, we start off with the intro and Barovia, village of Barovia. Chapter 4 we get Castle Ravenloft, etc., etc. I'll be covering the Castle Ravenloft last, in fact, because it is more than likely going to be one of the last things you interact with. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the only last thing you interact with. It is a very confusing module in the sense that the chapters don't lead into each other exactly. A perfect example being Chapter 8, Solenka Pass. After you do Solenka Pass, then immediately you would go ahead and do the Amber Temple. But there's a huge chapter gap between there. So for the instances of the series, we'll be going all over the place, but you'll be able to follow through no problem. For this particular video, we will be going over the introduction of Curse of Strahd as well as Chapter 1, Into the Mist. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So for the introduction, we get this nice little story overview about how your players will find themselves lost in the lands of Barovia, and they'll have to go around the place and collect awesome artifacts in order to defeat the Devil Strahd and make their way out of this abysmal place. This land is full of adventure and awesome stuff, but as well as full of death and despair, and that is kind of a key theme that your players are going to be running up against, that this place kind of sucks, and that is more motivation for your players to try and improve the lives of these people, and more importantly, just get out of here themselves. For the adventure structure here, we get this nice little detail on how Chapter 1 is going to give you adventure hooks to getting to the lands of Barovia. But as you can see here in Chapters 3 through 15, the detail areas that are corresponded in this place on this map are in regards of Chapter 2. You basically get this huge old map and say, your players could arrive here at any given point, and you just got to run with it. Which is, for the most part, true. Your players could theoretically, decide to not pick up on your story beats and just show up somewhere else. And you're going to have to be prepared for that. Obviously, you're going to try and talk to your players and see what their interests are in. And hopefully you play enough with these players that you know what they're going to hook on. But every once in a while, they will surprise you and won't latch on to the next quest. In which case, you're going to have to constantly think about the next areas that they could even possibly go to. For character levels, we're given the fact that this campaign takes us from levels 1 to 10, and it gives us some directions on how we can go ahead and use some milestone. But it's also interesting, it does say you can use a mixture of both XP and milestone. I personally have never used a combo of XP and milestone. I've used XP where, once you do an objective, you get XP. You don't just get XP for killing monsters because that's boring. But more often than not, I run milestone. And I think milestone works wonderfully for this adventure because there's a lot of important story beats where once your players actually complete these objectives and collect these items and go certain places and do certain things, it just makes sense that they level up and are able to get to higher level areas. And another showcasing of how the chapters don't correspond with the adventure at all, really, is this areas by level here. We get average level, area, and chapter. And as you can tell here, just listing down, we get first through third, and then fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. But as you can tell, all the chapters don't correspond anywhere close to the chapter levels, and especially they jump all over the place. 3, 5, 6, 8, 12, 11, 14, etc., etc. So just always keep that in mind that, once your players are crawling along around this map, that certain areas are probably pretty deadly for them, and, you just got to be prepared for if they think that they can handle any challenge. We get some really good information on how to use the 5 senses in this area labeled Marks of Horror. We get the unknown. Before a monster appears, take a moment to describe the odor that precedes it, the eerie sound it makes, or the weird shadow it casts. Play these things up, because you could just always say, oh, hey, it's a monster roll initiative. But if you take the time to describe what's happening in front of them, what they hear, what they see, what they taste, what they smell, once you get to actually describing these immense details, that can really help your players get into the mindset of their characters. They can really get a feel for what's going on, and if they really play into it, they can actually play into the horror that is befalling them. You can really show off how old this world really is, how everything is weathered and worn. You can show off that there's very little light in this world. The sun never creeps down onto the players for the most part. Every once in a while they might catch a glimpse, and you should give them that ray of hope every once in a while. But for the most part, sun is just not a part of this campaign. Giving human aspects to a non-human object is a really great way to sew in that eeriness that's floating all around. If you say that the house groans and the trees, smile at you, giving these weird sensations is really good way to put people on edge, and is a really great way to personify the world around them. And something really important I think some people seem to forget when they're running this module is they're trying to run it as a gothic horror. They're trying to be in your face about how creepy it is and how horror it is and how horrific and, this and that. But at the end of the day, if it is just 4 hours straight of just, horror, that's going to suck. That's going to really wear and tear on people's minds. And it's just kind of either one, boring, or it's unhealthy, or, it just wears out. So you should, at every once in a while, throw in some humor in there. Every once in a while, the vampire's coming for you and it's going to bite your head off. Oh, but you roll in that one and it slips into the mud and now it's got a face full of mud, and that's hilarious. You should, every once in a while, throw in something to relieve the tension. You should throw in a gag. You should have that commoner just shout out some expletive that really relieves the tension. You should really do things that make this world feel real and not just, death and despair. Just a quick glimpse into that introduction shows us a really great way to run this module. You should run it as a horror, but at the same time, you need to realize that this is a game. Your players are showing up to the table to have fun, and most important of all, you want to have fun. And I'm willing to bet that you are going to have some fun if all of your players are going to have fun. So play into that. You should really sit down with your players and discuss what kind of game that you want to play in, and really tailor that game to your desires. So many people have run this module so many different ways, and there is no one wrong way of doing it. Curse of Strahd natively is, horror, but you don't have to run it as horror. It could just be a hack and slash module. You could think of it like a 3D Castlevania. You could run it as true horror and introduce things like sanity and honor into your game and truly play into the horrible aspects and the things that your players may get up to in this module. You could run this module as hardcore and eschew the normal 5th edition rules in regards of getting rid of long rest and making it so that players really feel that sense of urgency whenever they take damage. You can play around with the mechanics of the game, you can play around with the world building, you can play around with the 5 senses. There's a lot of things you can do to really tailor this adventure to your own and make this adventure truly yours. I could go on talking all day about how to run this module, but let's go ahead and take a look at what this module actually is. And we're going to go ahead and start with Chapter 1, Into the Mist. It is here in Chapter 1 where we get the full details on the namesake of this adventure, Strahd's background. Full name, Strahd von Zarovich. Strahd was a prince of a kingdom. The king unfortunately died, and afterwards, the prince waged a long, bloody war against all of his enemies. Strahd was able to track down his foes and slay them in the very valley which this entire adventure takes place, Barovia. Strahd settled the land and built a castle, and he invited his mother and brother to live there. Unfortunately, his mother died on the journey to the castle. During his time lording over the land, he and his brother oversaw the land of Barovia, and eventually he fell in love with a woman. The woman's name was Tatiana, and even though Strahd loved this woman, Tatiana fell in love with his brother Sergei. This did not sit well with the Prince Strahd, and he cemented his powers by sealing a dark pact with dark powers. And doing so, he killed his brother and drank his blood. And when he went to go confront Tatiana, Tatiana threw herself from the cliffs and killed herself. When the castle guards saw this, they shot Strahd, and he should have died, but now he was no longer mortal, and he was able to stave off all of these mortal blows. He killed all of the guards, and he cried out to the heavens, and the skies erupted, and a mist enshrouded all of the land around him. Now locked in his own prison with no key, he has lived for hundreds of years as a vampire. He believes that the key to escaping Barovia is finding someone worthy to rule in his stead. However, in his arrogance and his just long-natured life, he truly believes that no one else is as worthy as he is. So he is caught in this vicious cycle of being locked away and never being able to leave. This is truly a tragic backstory to a character. Mind you should show no pity to Strahd. He is truly evil. But it shows how far someone's willing to go for love, and most important of all, what someone does once they have all of this power. So Strahd is sitting away in this castle, and he is the most powerful, he is the ancient, he is the land. So what does he do? Well, fortunately for us, we have 3 goals labeled out that Strahd wants to complete. Number 1, turn Irina Koliana. He believes that Irina is the reincarnation of Tatiana, and he is correct. When these lands sealed themselves away from the rest of the world, souls were trapped here. These souls constantly reincarnate into each other, and unfortunately, not everyone even has a soul in the lands of Barovia. Many people are soulless. But the ones that do have soul are reincarnations of people long since past, and Strahd has finally found himself the woman of his desires in the form of Irina. He wants to kill Irina and transform her into a vampire spawn, at which point she will no longer be able to die, or at least it's a lot harder for a vampire spawn to die. The second goal of Strahd's is to find Rudolf van Richten. Rumor has spread that a famous vampire hunter has found their way into the lands of Barovia, and Strahd wants to make sure that this guy doesn't get in the way of anything that he is doing. Strahd doesn't want to just natively kill this guy because killing him would be far too easy. He wants to capture Rudolf van Richten, lock him away in the dungeons of Castle Ravenloft, and slowly break his spirit. Rudolf van Richten is in fact a vampire hunter. However, unfortunately, he is not as strong as he once was. He is a little bit older, but he can certainly be a powerhouse, and most important of all, he can be a mentor to the player characters. And the third of Strahd's goals throughout the course of this campaign is to find a successor or a consort. Over time, Strahd is going to try and groom the party and see if any of them are eligible, if any of them are smart enough and strong enough and cruel enough to truly take his place. Over time, though, Strahd is going to realize that none of them are comparable to himself. He realizes that he is the best suited for this job, and none of them can match up in any way, shape, or form. But regardless, even if they aren't successful enough, they can certainly provide Strahd with a little bit of amusement. This module is not like other modules where the big bad evil guy is just sitting around doing nothing all day and just waiting for adventurers to show up to the final room. Strahd is an active force in this world, and you should play him as that. He is almost like a DMPC, never on DMPCs, mind you, but he is like a active force, and you will be running him constantly. He is a villain that will be in the face of the party. He is a villain that has his own goals, and you should have these goals in the background of the adventure at any given time. If your players do not heed any of the things that Strahd is trying to manipulate and force around the world, then Strahd will constantly get stronger and get what he wants. But if your players oppose Strahd, then of course, then his plans are going to be halted, and he's going to shift whatever goals he has in mind. He's only going to be pushing for so many things at a certain time. He can't do everything all at once, or maybe he simply just doesn't want to do everything at once. So you should always have some type of side tracker or at least some notes on what's going on in the world, because man, running this guy, you should definitely have him doing a lot of things in the background. But he's not just a background force, he is a front force, and we get this nice information on role-playing Strahd. Strahd is, once again, he might have a terrifying background, but he is not a sympathetic character. This guy is evil to the core, but he is charismatic, he is intelligent, and you should play him up as such. He is a monster more than he is a man now. All these hundreds of years of being a vampire has truly led him to being a horrifying person, and he no longer is the prince that he once was. He used to be a conqueror, but now instead he plays with people. He toys with emotions, and he's going to try and drive a wedge in between the characters and try and drive a wedge between all of the NPCs that your players meet. He is going to make empty promises. He is going to make vague threats. He is going to do things to truly liven the place up, because this is the only enjoyment he has left in this world. When Strahd attacks, he's not attacking simply with the goal of just killing the players. That would be far too easy. He could kill them at any given time. He wants to test the characters. He wants to see where their powers lie. He wants to see where their motivations lie. He is going to go out and toy with the characters, in fact. He is going to play on the fears of the characters, and he is going to love breaking them. So this section here on Strahd is an excellent read. You get to really dive into the mindset of this character and figure out how you should go about role-playing them. And you should figure out how you are going to roleplay him, because he should be an active force in the world. Your players should not wait until the very last session to talk to this guy. Throughout the course of the campaign, he should be showing up all the time. And mind you, he doesn't have to show up as himself. He could be showing up disguised as someone else and getting to know the players a little bit better and actually discovering their own personal insights. And having that information drip-fed into Strahd is going to be excellent, because he's going to use all that information leveraged against them. This villain is one of the most fleshed out villains ever in D&D history, and you should use that to your advantage. There is so much information both in this book and out anywhere else on the internet that you should find and read up on and truly get into the mindset of this excellent antagonist. For the second part of Chapter 1 here, we have the Fortunes of Ravenloft. This is a tarot card reading you're going to perform for the players, and with this, your players are going to be able to find out where they can find Strahd once they go into Castle Ravenloft, the placement of 3 powerful items scattered about the land, and the identity of a powerful ally who will be the one to fight Strahd alongside them. At some point during the course of this module, your players are going to interact with the Vistani. The Vistani are a Romani-like people, and they travel around and actually have free reign in this domain because Strahd allows it. Long ago, when Strahd was alive, he was injured in battle, and the Vistani actually took him in, and they actually protected him from assassins. And because of that kindness, Strahd, even in death, allows them the luxury of moving about the lands unfettered. The Vistani are going to be the ones to provide this fortune telling for your players, and this is an extremely important detail about this campaign, because this card reading is the reason why this game is so modular. So many people have run this game so differently because of this tarot reading, and it is fantastic. It lets you truly decide where your players explore around the world and who they meet as friends and enemies, and most important of all, where your players are going to have the epic showdown with Strahd. And every single result here can be absolutely fantastic, but something important to note here is when you do this card reading, there is a very big gap between players that run this purely with fate intended and just draw cards and play it as is, and there's also a lot of DMs that rig the deck. So if you go ahead and run the tarot reading as totally random, you are leaving this up to chaos. There is a lot of times where if you leave this completely up to chance, then certain items are going to be pretty much on top of each other. There is certain allies which you don't think might not fit. There is certain locations where you don't want Strahd to be in the final fight with. But leaving it entirely up to chance flexes your DM muscles and try and figure out how to work this campaign around the fact that there was this random reading. With a random reading, you can get the best results ever, or you could get the worst results ever. Mind you, worst is totally subjective. If you love leaving things up to chance, then go ahead and leave it up to chance. It is exciting because if you leave this completely up to chance, then both you and the players are going to be on the same page right when you flip that card of not knowing. You will eventually know, of course, but they will take a longer time to realize what these cards actually mean. On the flip side, if you tailor this deck and rig it, then you can go ahead and look at this campaign and say, I want an item here, here, and here. I definitely want Strahd to be fought here, and I definitely want this person to be their ally. Doing this makes it so that you don't have to spend nearly as much time looking into locations you don't care about. You can ensure that the items are placed exactly where you want and the items are acquired at a certain time. And you can make sure that that favorite NPC you love is right there with the players at the finish line. I'm willing to bet that if you go onto all of the forums, on the Discord, on the subreddit, I'm sure there's a lot of arguments about which one is better and which one is worse. I am going to go ahead and tell you that there is no better and there is no worse. It is entirely up to you. If you embrace randomness in your games, then go ahead and run it as is and shuffle that deck and flip those cards and be surprised right there alongside your party. But if you want to tailor this to your specific desires and maybe to the specific needs of your players, then go ahead and rig it. There is no wrong answer. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into what each of these cards actually means. Card number 1 is going to be the Tome of Strahd. This card tells of history. Knowledge of the ancient will help you better understand your enemy. This is a journal written by Strahd oh so long ago, which has been losted to him. If your players go ahead and find this, there's a handout in this module which your players will be able to read, and it is a pretty dope thing. Your players get some really good information on the man Strahd is and what is going on in the world, and of course, it just looks really neat. It's a good way to get your players hooked into the world. Something to consider though is this is only 2 pages of notes, and if you really want to, you can go ahead and expound upon this. There is supplements online which expand this to great detail, or you can go ahead and jot down your own notes. You do not have to just leave it as is. You can go ahead and remove some details that you don't like in here, and more importantly, you can even add some details that you can think that really fleshes out who Strahd actually is and convey that to the players. The second card here is the Holy Symbol of Ravenkind. This card tells of a powerful force for good and protection, a holy symbol of great hope. This item is incredibly strong. This item allows players to cast Hold Vampires, which is essentially a hold person, but modified for vampires. This allows players to turn the undead around them, and this allows there to be sunlight. All these 3 are incredibly powerful options, and especially if you only have one cleric or paladin in the party, it is going to be incredibly good because it'll really help their undead fighting. Something important to note here, it states that it requires attunement by a cleric or paladin of good alignment. Obviously, not every group is going to have clerics or paladins in their roster, and even more so, even if they do have a cleric or paladin, they may not be good alignment. This is definitely a holdover from older editions where alignment actually came into effect quite a lot. In this module, there is several instances of your alignment actually mattering. But I'm willing to bet that for today's day and age, a lot of people kind of forget about alignment. Alignment doesn't have any mechanical inputs in base 5e, so a lot of people just go ahead and get rid of it. That is entirely your prerogative if you want alignment to truly matter for this campaign. I certainly think that you should, and you should actually add mechanical implications for alignment in this campaign because I think it really fits the setting. Mind you, does this item have to be only used by good people? Certainly not. I think one thing you could do is if you don't have a good aligned group, or if they fall to the dark powers, but you certainly want them to still have this item, then you should go ahead and when the players fall from grace, or if they fall to the dark powers, that this item gets corrupted as well. And maybe some of its powers get changed and shifted, but it still retains some aspect of why we want to have it in the first place. Maybe this item itself even starts to corrupt the players with its ill intent. There's a lot of ways you can play with this item and not just make it, oh, it can only be attuned by 2 of the many classes in the campaign, oh, and it can only be attuned by people that are strictly good. The third card here is the Sun Sword. This is a card of power and strength. It tells of a weapon of vengeance, a sword of sunlight. And my oh my, is this a weapon of vengeance? Absolutely. A Sun Sword is natively a very powerful weapon. It is essentially a D&D lightsaber. But this one in particular has a personality to it. The Sun Sword is sentient and chaotic good with the intelligence of 11, a wisdom of 17, and charisma of 16. And this weapon is able to convey emotions to its wielder. This weapon has a personality of its own, and you should totally play that up. This thing is an excellent weapon, and more so, it's not just the fact that this thing can, give you good feels. It's the fact that this weapon is incredibly strong. This Sun Sword is a +2 longsword, and when you hit an undead with it, the target takes an additional 1d8 points of radiant damage. And that, really adds up over time. And especially if it's in the hands of someone that can attack multiple times, that is really going to add up. And even more so is the fact that this weapon can emit sunlight. And this is a very big deal because vampires, of course, abhor sunlight. So anybody armed with this is able to amplify some light out and cause a terrible day for all of those nasty vampires that are skulking around. Card number 4 is Strahd's Enemy. This card sheds light on one who will help you greatly in the battle against darkness. This is going to be your ally in the adventure. This is going to be the person who, through thick and thin, will be the one to help your players out when they go ahead and go to Castle Ravenloft for the last time to go ahead and smite Strahd. Each individual NPC that could be Strahd's enemy is given some detail and a different stat block and information on whether they join the adventurers throughout the course of the campaign or if they only join them for the final assault and killing with Strahd. But they all share something unique. Whichever one is the chosen ally will gain the following action: Inspire. While within sight of Strahd, the character grants inspiration to one player character they can see. And this is obviously a big deal because they're essentially giving out an advantage roll at any given point, which is pretty awesome. Inspiration is a mechanic that some DMs totally forget about and some DMs give out like candy. So if you're one of those DMs that gives it out like candy and players have it all the time, you are probably going to have to decide to change this inspiration to maybe be a bardic inspiration where they just get a d6 or something. Or you can make it something even more elaborate. Many DMs have done many a great thing by buffing up the NPC that is allotted to them. So you should totally keep into consideration that not all of the allies are created equal. Some of them are just children. Some of them have stat blocks that are going to be actually stronger than the player characters. There is a large variance in how powerful each individual ally is, but regardless of how powerful they are, giving out inspiration is a pretty big deal. And the fifth and final card is Strahd. Your enemy is a creature of darkness whose powers are beyond mortality. This card will lead you to him. This card is going to portend where your players are going to always be able to find Strahd. Strahd, as previously mentioned, he moves around a lot. He does a lot of things. He isn't just going to be locked away in Castle Ravenloft in a single room at any given point. He will be moving around the world. He'll be interacting with the players. He'll be moving around the castle itself. But no matter what you do, your players will always be able to head to a location and find Strahd there. Unless he is... I will be doing a separate video on every single card location here because it is going to be a tremendous amount of time because it is using a full deck of cards. It's using 54 different results here. So a lot to go over. But I will go ahead and show you how the card reading will work. So if you're playing online and bought the module, then you are graced by being given the Tarokka card deck. And this is excellent because 1, you are given the full deck, but 2, most important of all, the deck already comes split. And why is it split? Because the cards are in 2 different piles. There is a high deck and there is a low deck. If you have not bought the module, or if you're playing in person and have not bought the Tarokka deck, then you will go ahead and probably have to use a deck of playing cards. Playing with an actual deck of cards isn't that bad at all. All you need to do is simply separate the face cards from the number cards. And you'll go ahead and place the numbered cards in 1, 2, and 3, and the face cards in 4 and 5. So as we can see here for Strahd's enemy, it'll be a Jack of Diamonds or a King of Diamonds. But for the treasure locations, we have 1 of swords or 2 of swords. Mind you, swords is spades, hearts is glyphs, clubs is stars, and diamonds is coins. So let's go ahead and shuffle and do a random card reading, shall we? Alright, let's see what we get for this run. We have the Evoker. We have the Philanthropist. We have the Abjurer. And now we go over to the high deck for areas 4 and 5 here. We have Dark Lord, and we have Tempter. So with these results in mind, let's go ahead and check what they actually mean. So as we can see here, card number 1 is going to be the Tome of Strahd, and we pulled Evoker. So Evoker says that we search for the crypt of a wizard ordinaire. His staff is the key. The treasure is hidden in the crypt of Gilmore Nibblenobs, which is located in Castle Ravenloft. Ooh, spooky. Card number 2 is the holy symbol of Ravenkind, and we pulled the Philanthropist, meaning that we need to look to a place where sickness and madness are bred, where children once cried, the treasure lies still. And the treasure is located in the nursery of the Abbey of St. Markovia, which is located in the village of Kresk. Ooh, that's pretty far away, but hey, that's a powerful item. Card number 3 is the Sun Sword, and we got the Abjurer. I see a fallen house guarded by a great stone dragon. Look to the highest peak. The treasure lies in the beacon of Argenvostolt. That is a really cool pull, actually, having the Sun Sword at a place that needs to be lit. You know, I think that's pretty symbolic. Card number 4 is Strahd's Enemy, and we unfortunately got the worst pull in the entire deck. Dark Lord. Ah, the worst of all truths. You must face the evil of this land alone. So I'm going to talk about this card in my actual review on every single location. I'm going to go ahead and say real quick though, this is definitely a card that you should consider getting rid of because not having a true ally in these lands kind of sucks. But hey, if you are up to chance, then go ahead and leave it as is. It's only a 1 in 14 chance that you actually get this anyway, right? And card 5 is Strahd's location in Castle Ravenloft, where he can always be found. And we got Innocent. He dwells with one whose blood sealed his doom, a brother of light snuffed out too soon. And this is really poetic. I love this location. Strahd is faced in Sergei's tomb. He is found weeping over the tomb of his own brother that he personally slew. And that is an epic ending, for sure. So with that quick little read, you can see here how these various locations are really going to size up how this adventure goes. A perfect example is, just with this card reading, we got one of the items located in the crypts of Castle Ravenloft. And lo and behold, Strahd is also found in the crypts of Castle Ravenloft. So do your players just go there and find the item at the very last moment? Do they maybe not even find it? Who knows? Maybe they do some type of caper and get in there early and try and steal the item, but accidentally stumble across Strahd. There's a lot of things that can happen with this adventure, and this card reading is what fuels so much adventure. It is the driving cause of so much variance in this module, and it is absolutely fantastic, and I love this stuff. So what I did right there was totally random, just a totally random card reading. But the thing is you may have it in your mind that you want to purposely seed certain parts of this adventure. So what do? If you're playing in person, you're going to have to learn some sleight of hand real quick and shuffle the deck and make it look all fancy, but go ahead and slip the cards that you want in the specific order that you desire. If you're playing online, this is made infinitely easier because you can just go ahead and have these cards already baked in and just put them on the GM layer, and your players aren't going to see them, and then you go ahead and say, I flip it over, and it was totally a random card. Playing online, of course, has extreme benefits. So once again, I cannot give a recommendation on leaving it up to chance or by going ahead and cheating the deck. There is no wrong way of doing it, as long as you are ready for whatever consequences arrive from whatever decision you choose. And for the third and final part of Chapter 1, we have the adventure hooks. We get how your players could actually find themselves in the lands of Barovia. In the first of the 4 of these hooks, we get Plea for Help. In here, we get information on Arigal. Arigal being a Vistani assassin, sent by Strahd actually, to lure adventurers into the lands of Barovia. Adagal is going to go ahead and describe Barovia as a land of beauty, and he's going to go ahead and say that he works for the burgomaster being essentially a mayor, of a nearby town. But the thing is he doesn't work for that burgomaster, and man, Barovia is not that pretty. He is going to go ahead and hand the characters a note, and this note is going to say, hey, the love of my life, Irina Kolyana, has been afflicted by evil, and I need help. So players that are driven by adventure are going to go ahead and take the bait on this. And bait it is, because this was totally forged. If your players go ahead and follow in Aragel's footsteps, they'll find themselves consumed by the mist and find themselves in the lands of Barovia. In the second adventure hook, we have mysterious visitors. There's going to be complaints about people nearby, and when your players go ahead and go and investigate, they'll find a camp of Vistani. Once your players actually talk to the Vistani, they'll find that these are not evil people. They're just simply passing through here and they're about to leave. The leader of the Vistani here, Stanimir, is going to go ahead and invite the characters around the campfire and begin to tell them the story of Strahd. He is actually going to recount the tale of when Strahd was injured and how the Vistani were able to keep him alive and fended off assassins. They are going to say that a terrible curse has befallen their noble prince and turning him into a tyrant. And they're going to ask you to see if they can put an end to the Dreadlord's curse upon their souls. This is once again sort of a lure into the lands of Barovia. In some ways it is true though. The Vistani don't like the fact that, Strahd is totally evil. But at the same time, they get some good use out of the lands of Barovia, so... While your players join this caravan, they will find themselves enveloped in the mist all around, and eventually they will actually get lost. They will, however, come across Madame Ava and the Vistani camp there, and that is going to be where they will get their fortune read. For the third hook, we get Werewolves in the Mist. This one incorporates a lot of the factions of Faerun, and your players could be agents from certain factions, and we get really good information on every single one of the factions, the Harpers, the Zentarum, the Lord's Alliance, the Emerald Enclave. And every single one of the factions provides a neat little hook on why your characters are going after these werewolves. These werewolves are evil, so your players are going out and trying to kill them. No matter which faction they may come from, or they might come from multiple factions that are just working together as a conglomerate, as they chase down these werewolves, they will find themselves tracking in a misty forest, and after hours of fruitless searching, they will become engulfed in a thick fog, and eventually, even the werewolf tracks that they are tracking down will disappear, and they'll find themselves on a dirt road in the lands of Barovia. And the fourth of the hooks here, we have Creeping Fog, which is essentially just the latter part of every single one of the other hooks. Your players are just chilling in the woods at some point, and the air grows chill, the fire gets put out, and all of a sudden you notice that you are not where you started. Each of these hooks has their own unique spin on how your players arrive in the lands of Barovia, and they all have lasting consequences and possible actions as well. For Plea for Help, your players can actually go ahead and meet Aragal later, and they'll go ahead and say, hey, you tricked us. For Mysterious Visitors, your players may meet Stanimir again, and they can go ahead and say, hey, that wasn't cool. What's going on here? For Werewolves in the Mist, your players can at some point meet those werewolves and find out all the horrible things those werewolves are doing and put a stop to it. And for Creeping Fog, your players may have been doing something important and that gets cut off. They might be, vanguards of a king and they're sent out somewhere and now they've just disappeared. They may just be travelers that just stumbled across each other along the road and they all wound up in the middle of nowhere. There's so many ways you can play up this hook and there's just no end to how much you can get out of it. But no matter which hook you chose, your players find themselves in the lands of Barovia, and that is when their lives are going to get a whole lot worse and a lot more fun. We'll be going over the lands of Barovia in the Chapter 2 video, but just like that, we're already done with the Chapter 1 video. We got some really good info on Strahd, we got some awesome info on the readings, and we got some amazing ways to get your players hooked into this adventure. This is just the starting point of an excellent adventure, and man oh man is this adventure excellent. I've ran it multiple times, I've played in it, and I can promise you if you go ahead and talk on the Discords and on the subreddits and anywhere else, you're going to find DMs that are going to be ranting and raving about this. This is the most popular module for a reason. This module is fantastic. There's so many things going on for it. The land is incredible. The villains your players are going up against are fantastic. The friends they can make along the way are great. There's just so many things going on with it, and I can't wait to dive into every single little bit of detail about it. So go ahead and tell me, how are you going to roleplay Strahd? Are you going to play him off as the charismatic individual that he could be? Are you going to play him up as way more intelligent than the rest of the party and he knows it? Are you going to play him off as secretive? Are you going to play him off as seductive? There's so many things you can play him up as. What are you going to do with the tarot reading? Are you going to rig it or are you going to leave it up to chance? And if you do rig it, then where are you going to send your players and for what purpose? And go ahead and tell me, what hook are you going to use to grab your players in here? I've used various hooks to get my players into the lands of Barovia, and there really is no wrong way of doing it, so long as you make it feel real and you make it have lasting consequences. Go ahead and tell me all about it in the comments. I can't wait to hear it, and I love responding to all y'all stuff, and I love reading it because I just love reading everyone's info on it. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you all for watching, and have a good time.